today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Dinesh Dua. He's the chairperson of Pharmaceutical Export Council of India. He's the chairman of Entrepreneurship and Startups at Confederation of Indian Industries for North India. He is the CEO of Nectar Lifesciences. He is the alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad, and we often see you on various television debates on prime channels like CNBC Awaaz, CNBC TV 18, ET Now, and many of them. So without a doubt, a pharmaceutical expert. My first question to you, Mr. Dua, is that how has COVID-19 opened the opportunities for the pharmaceutical industry?
Thank you very much, Tanya, for getting me on your channel. It's such a privilege to be here along with a young, bright spark like yourself. COVID-19 basically is a virus attack, and virus, as you know, is not a living being, unlike bacteria. Bacteria is a living being. A virus is never a living being, right? And in this case, it's a mutated version of SARS, which you're very familiar with. It also created huge amount of devastation, particularly in Southeast Asia, and also MERS, which subsequently followed in the Middle East in particular. So, you know, this has been an unprecedented flu attack, a pandemic attack at that, which WHO delayed for a little while in announcing it as a pandemic for a variety of reasons. We all know that from the media. What's happened now is that after Spanish flu, which devastated something like 500 million people, out of which 118 million people from India died, unfortunately, way back in 1918. This is the worst pandemic current humanity has ever witnessed. So with that backdrop, it certainly has opened great opportunities for the sector worldwide, and in particular, India. India, as you know, is a pharmacy to the world. It's a company that Pharmaceuticals Limited, HPL in Mumbai, wherein everything was being imported into the country. And today we have a situation where we supply our value-added, very competitive, highest quality standard medicines to about 206 out of 211 countries. We control 40% of the volumes of the generic medicines in the United States, 28% in EU, about 10% in East Asia, and overall worldwide about 26% in terms of volumes. So, with that, obviously, COVID per se has currently no treatment, as you know very well. COVID-19 is witnessing a huge amount of devastation in the United States, highest ever in the history of US. Even if you take world wars, even if you take the attack in the United States, and therefore, and Europe, of course, you have another close to about 40,000 plus people who passed away, unfortunately, right? India plays a very important role in terms of follow-up therapy. First of all, you would be familiar with the hydroxychloroquine, HCQ as we call it in our parlance, as also paracetamol. We are the world givers. We control close to about 60% of the volumes of hydroxychloroquine, and almost a similar number in percentile terms worldwide for paracetamol, which is a follow-up therapy of pain management, antipyretic that is controlling the fever and so on and so forth. So that's one part which India has been very magnanimous in offering to the world, in spite of the fact that we have domestic requirements and we have adequate coverage for domestic requirement for both the molecules. We've still gone ahead and provided it to 90 odd countries. And besides that, there are anti-HIV molecules, which are used for anti-AIDS and HIV, right? And three of the molecules, which are very important molecules, are basically topinavir and ritonavir or smeltavir. Some of them are under patent, but due to this global crisis, the patents would not matter because it's an emergent situation. And therefore, those are also manufactured in India in a sizable way. There's another molecule by Gilead, which has shown tremendous amount of promise, which is, remdesivir, which have proven very successful trials and yet to be given approval by US FDA. We expect the approval to come in another about 10 days or so. As soon as the US FDA comes under the WHO protocol, we can go ahead and give the approval in India also. And hopefully, with the tremendous amount of collaboration that we have with Gilead, 4 or 5 Indian companies, we should be in a position to not only produce it very economically, qualitatively, we would be able to feed the entire world like the other VIRs, anti-HIV molecules, to the rest of the world. So it'll be a kind of a cooperative, collaborative effort along with Gilead to provide this wonderful treatment going forward. Same is the case with vaccines. There are 70 candidates today, organizations which are involved in target hunting for COVID-19. The topmost of them currently, as I know, is Oxford Medical School and Oxford University. They've gone ahead and produced commercially, with permission from the UK government, 10 million doses, a big risk they've taken, because their confidence emerges and emanates from the fact that they've done a small little trial of 100-odd patients, and the results extremely promising. So they were earlier thinking of introducing the vaccine towards the end of 2020, by November, December. Now they're so upbeat, both trials in UK and Australia, that they are very confident by August, September, they would be in a position to offer this vaccine worldwide. Besides that, there are 2 very exciting Indian companies. My ex-company, Zydus Cadila Healthcare, is right up there. They're currently into late stages of animal trials, and it'll take them another 6 months to get on to the human trials. So they would be towards the later half, the Q4 of 2020. And then you have a very exciting prospect in Bharat Biotech, Dr. Krishna Ella, an amazing entrepreneur in biotech field, a very, very leading personality. They are developing an altogether new vaccine, which is intranasal vaccine, because COVID virus, first of all, lodges here and then goes into the body through the upper respiratory tract. So they're going to follow the same format, and they're going to create a mechanism by which this will kill and destroy COVID-19. So I'm very hopeful that in about 6 months or thereabouts, either of the 2 companies, along with Oxford, will be in a position to provide relief and succor from this COVID-19 infestation. So that's broadly where India is, and this is going to give tremendous opportunities to the Indian pharmaceutical sector, not only in pharmaceuticals per se, in the area of vaccines, in the area of diagnostics, where we are languishing very significantly. We are way behind the rest of the developed world in giving the kits. I'm sure sooner or later we'll, ramp it up very substantially with the help of the government and take it forward. And in addition to that, it's also a wake-up call for our country to support the warriors who are fighting this battle against COVID-19, which is the doctors, the paramedical staff, the nurses, and other associated staff. We need to provide them enough amount of PPEs, personal protective equipment, as you know, which is in global shortage. UK has a stock of only 2 or 3 days. US has a stock of about a week or 10 days or thereabouts. It's the same case here in India. So it's a wake-up call for we entrepreneurs in the pharmaceutical sector to start producing the masks, N95 in particular, which is required again for the medical fraternity, and also, the gloves. So broadly, that's the landscape of the pharmaceutical and allied sector with the COVID infestation currently and post-COVID going forwards, because this virus is not going to go away as per the subject matter experts. It's going to remain there till October or even till December. So we need to be prepared 100% or 200% for that matter to make sure that we are fully equipped to fight this menace and then root it out by the beginning of 2021.
It's really good and promising to see that India is playing such a dominant role and displaying its leadership, especially when it comes to this situation. And in fact, so much so that US has recently opened the doors to 4 drug makers, which was held for a very long time. So is this a result of the medical diplomacy, and are we going to reap some more benefits?
Sure, good point, Tanya. I must appreciate that, because there was this lurking feeling amongst us in India, because we've had the largest number of ANDA, abbreviated new drug applications, which is a compendium, very large compendium of how you've developed the molecule, how you've developed the formulation, huge details. It goes very quickly. There were times in the 80s and 90s when we used to send this by courier And it used to cost us a fortune sending that compendium. It cost you a huge amount of money in preparing that apart. And we have the largest number of approved ANDAs. This is like a passport to the United States, very lucrative market, $450 billion, right? So it kind of, we have the largest number of ANDAs, including now in the United States. So we've overtaken them. We are number one, outstanding, right? We have the largest number of US FDA approved plants, including US for the first time in the last 3 or 4 months, if my memory doesn't fail me. We have the largest number of US FDA approved plants, including US. We have the largest number of drug master files. You know, you have the API, the bulk pharma. The bulk pharma has to be regulated in a compendium called drug master file, US drug master file. That is submitted for the API, and ANDA, which is known as market authorization in Europe, is basically the formulation part of it, factoring in the API. So DMF gets dovetailed into ANDA. So we had a feeling that in spite of such amazing success, there were far too many cases where delays used to occur, where for flimsy reasons, ANDAs were held back and approvals were held back. And lo and behold, there is a bit of a diplomacy, I would admit, to an extent, not largely, but to an extent, because President Trump reached out to Honorable Prime Minister Shri Modi, and then immediately HCQ, hydroxychloroquine and paracetamol, was liberalized and sent out to US. And in return, obviously, US has done this bit of expediting the genuine approvals. These are not ingenuine, mind you. These have gone through huge amount of rigors of inspection, even more rigorous than ever before. And after that, through a considerable process, the process has been expedited, which was relatively slow. So to that extent, you can say there's a bit of a diplomacy, and that's it.
It's very interesting to see how the international dynamics are also playing out in this pandemic, and we're seeing a lot of countries also taking very, very strong initiatives, and a lot of companies have also expressed that they would prefer moving out of China because nobody wants supply chain bottlenecks. So another ray of hope for the India pharma industry.
Yeah, sure. I think you questions, I must say that, compliments. You see, a lot of companies, as you very correctly pointed out, are very upset with China for a variety of reasons, right? And they have reason to be. As you would know, that Germany last night, sent a debit note of 130 billion euros. You know, that's very funny, for disruption of all kinds of types, and cliches which have been used as disruption, then loss of economy, loss of jobs, and so on and so forth. I mean, that's more symbolic than actually real. And China has protested big time. President Trump has all along been extremely vocal in saying that this is a China virus and not a COVID virus. I do foresee these rumblings taking an impact on the factory of the world, which is China. And that indirectly, Tanya, means that India has a great opportunity, believe you me. This kind of opportunity will never come your way. You know, when things are down and out, when you see a ray of hope, you perk up. And I think as an Indian, you and me have every reason to be perked up, because a lot of supply chain disruption would basically mean moving on to India. India is the largest democracy. India is not controlled by the guns or enforced discipline and so on and so forth. And it's a pharmacy to the world. And particularly in my field, I see a huge amount of gravitational pull from India, because India, as it is, from a regulatory landscape in terms of complying with very stringent regulations of US FDA, EDQM, and Japanese PMDA, KFDA, Korean FDA, and very many other agencies is 100%. Our knowledge at times, both legal as well as regulatory, is even better than Americans and Europeans, and we are respected the world over for that. Our skills of compilation of the regulatory compendiums like ANDAs, marketing authorization, DMFs, both US, EU, Japan, Korea, is humongous. Whereas China lags behind big time. There's only one difference, we've let go and let slip the APIs and KSM. We are vulnerably dependent to the extent of 90% of a $22 billion domestic market on the APIs from China. because over the last about 5 years, Chinese have taken a huge amount of leapfrog and ascendancy over India through, institutional initiatives and interventions by the government of China. May it be the cost of interest, which is only about 4 to 4.5%, as compared to 13 to 14% for the MSME sector, which is a lifeline for India for practically everything that we do in pharmaceuticals. Close to about 60 to 70% of manufacturing is done in the MSME sector for domestic, and close to about 30 to 40% of exports. Exports is another 22 billion. So altogether, the current market is pegged at about 41 to 42 billion dollars. Very robust market, growing at about 12% year on year. So that being said, if we are at $42 billion today, I see this number in the next 5 years, and hold your breath, going up to $100 billion, primarily because India is the ultimate destination, and more so on account of the gravitational pull from China of most of the biotech, diagnostics, medical devices, and in the last pecking order, the pharmacy. As it is, there are not many pharmaceutical companies, except R&D to an extent, right? But the rest of the verticals that I mentioned just now, biotechnology, devices, and diagnostics, India would be the right destination. What we need to do to attract them is to improve on ease of doing business, which is where we're lagging behind China. The fiscal incentives are given to MSME industry. Huge amount of infrastructure needs to be upscaled and made convenient, and large pharma, parks can be created going forwards to attract these behemoths to come and set up shop in India.
You spoke about very important steps that government needs to take in terms of infrastructure changes and everything. So when such a situation happens, the first thing that people identify what are the kind of loopholes that exist in the public healthcare system, and clearly, I mean, the whole world is talking about it. So do you feel that once this is all over, the focal point for the entire world will become healthcare development? And what steps should India take? Because we clearly have taken some rapid measures, but yet, we're far, far away from it being anywhere near ideal given our size of the population.
See, Tanya, what is important today in infrastructure is to compare yourselves with the Western world, compare yourself with China, the emerging warhorse and the factory of the world. And in that perspective, we have to clearly understand that the GDP allocation to R&D in our country is far too low. We were expecting this year from Madam Sitaraman, the Honorable Finance Minister, a minimum allocation of 3.5%, but it's fallen way short of that at about 2.5%. The developed world and China, they are anything between 4 to 7%, right? The Western nations in particular are about 5%. Private sector companies are close to about 5 to 7% as well, but the government is not putting enough resources in terms of the R&D. In terms of infrastructure, we are way short, unquestionably, right? And therefore, the government's top priority will be to create enough infrastructure, right from primary healthcare centers to secondary and then on to tertiary, and then on to metros and mini metros, for creating, enough hospitals and care centers, as well as other support system in the ecosystem per se. So that being said, this would require a public-private partnership. This cannot be done exclusively by the government or by the private sector. So it has to be a collaborative effort. And then you create enough incentives or ecosystem for the big boys of the global industry to come in and set up shop. Per capita availability of pharmaceuticals, in spite of being the pharmacy to the world, as well as of the healthcare facilities, is abysmally low, in the lowest bottom 10 of the world. That needs to be improved dramatically. So more and more of allocation from the government, more and more participation from the private sector, and more enablers like ourselves in CII, FICCI, and various other organizations like Pharmexil for pharmaceuticals, and a whole host of other export promotion council. They all need to put their heads together along with NITI Aayog and PMO to make sure, and of course, unquestionably, the ministry is concerned, Department of Health, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Commerce, to put our heads together, create a vision. Actually, there's a beautiful document which has already been created, Pharma Vision 2020. So on similar lines, if you can have health, that'll go a long way in terms of making sure that not only do we become self-sufficient, we become world's, and we, in terms of creating infrastructure which is world class, maybe in ways better than China going forwards in about 5 to 10 years' time.
Fantastic. So with infrastructure, another thing that's doing the rounds and is making people very hopeful is that our medical tourism could rise. But although from where I was reading from 2014, our medical tourism has already been increasing at a rate of 55% year on year. So does this uprise will continue according to you?
Certainly, yes, more than ever before, because we are on a very small base on medical tourism. 55% sounds great, but look at the base. Base is very small, abysmally small. What needs to be done to up the ante in medical tourism, which has a huge staggering potential, is again the same thing, that you have to create enough infrastructure, you have to create enough facilities, you have to make sure that people feel extremely comfortable in terms of coming to India and getting the right kind of treatment. Special surgeries under NHS in UK can take you anything between 1 to 3 years before you finally get your turn. Here, you sit on the computer, and the best world-class facilities will give you an appointment in a matter of a couple of days, and then you can fly down to India. You can get the best possible treatment at virtually 10 to 15 or 20% of the cost. You may not be able to cover it under NHS in UK or under various insurance schemes in US and elsewhere, wherever there is substantial insurance coverage. But then you have to co-pay in majority of the policies, particularly in the US, you have to co-pay 10, 15, 20, 30, 40%, depending on the policy that you take. Now, the cost that you end up paying in India in an expedited manner of a matter of days, if not months, is nothing as compared to what you have to co-pay. Even if you don't have to co-pay for that matter. Let's argue for a moment. Even then, it's worth your while to work out the net present value of the investment that you will make ultimately in giving the insurance premium and stuff of that nature, right? Even if the state pays, if you deteriorate and God forbid you pass away, and there's no money, doesn't matter. And 1/10, 1/20th of the money is no money at all by the Western standards. So I think, in my considered opinion, medical tourism has a huge potential. Here again, we need to, put our heads together with industry as well as the policymakers to facilitate this in such a seamless and smooth manner that more and more, foreigners can come and get their treatment done here very quickly, very expeditiously, and highly economically.
Great. So, Mr. Dua, my last question to you is that the whole world is eyeing on the COVID-19 vaccine. How soon can we expect it to come in? Also, there's a lot of news about plasma therapy being tried out and it showing some signs of success. So should we be hopeful with that? What would you like to say?
Certainly, yes. Certainly, yes. I think the name of the game definitely on a long term is vaccine, but with a word of caution. I mean, I'll be very, very cautious, that this virus has a propensity to mutate very, very quickly. You've now witnessed that people were exhibiting symptoms and therefore you could detect the patient. You've known about cases in the last about 3, 4, 5 days that there are patients who are asymptomatic. They are not showing any symptoms and still they are COVID infested. I hope and pray that that's true or not true, whatever, because if you're doing the testing through an antibody test, which is currently available from China and a couple of other places, right, can give erratic results. And I hope that this is an error, real, because if it's real, then you have a huge problem on hands, and that would have to be tackled at a different plateau, at a different wavelength altogether. So, therefore, a vaccine, flexible vaccine, a vaccine which has multiple offshoots of tackling different variants of the virus would be the order of the day. We might treat one virus, one mutated virus, leave the other. We might treat two and leave the third or the fourth one or fifth one. So adequate care will have to be taken, but this is an evolution. I suspect that, you will have the Oxford vaccine hitting the market first. That's my firm belief. They would cater to two of the variants, as I know of today. They might even cater to another couple of them because they have a full-blown trial of 500 patients going on in the UK. And you'll be very pleasantly surprised that, when they asked for the volunteers to enroll for the trials, within a day and a half or two, if I remember correctly, it was over. I mean, that means they didn't want, and it's on their website if you see, they didn't want any further volunteers because they were done. That was the kind of excitement of people out there to find out quickly a treatment in terms of the vaccine. So that'll be phase one of the vaccine. Phase two of the vaccine provided by others, including two Indian leading companies, as well as 67 other candidates, because there's 70 in all, right, would be different, because once you've given phase one, everybody would try to be a commercial winner, and they would give multivalent vaccine, which is, variety one, variant 2, variant 3, variant 4, whatever. As it mutates, you'll continue to evolve. So the broad period of evolution of a vaccine could be 6 months to 18 months as we go along. And I think that should see to it that, like SARS, MERS, that should be the end of COVID-19, unless something else crops up, which I pray it doesn't, right? So that's one. Two is plasma treatment. Plasma treatment is known for quite some time. It isn't a new factor. Gamma globulins, globulins, protein therapies. Even when I was a student in 1978 in IIM Ahmedabad, I worked with a pioneering company called Bharat Serums and Vaccines, a very precious company. And Dr. Vinod Khatri, who's the doyen of the industry and a great pathologist, hats off to him. He started working on plasma at that point in time, right? And then it lost its way as we went along. And now it's again research back, of course, in a different and very, very advanced methodology. As you rightly said, that in Delhi, one of the patient has been treated successfully. One patient is not enough. I mean, you would require huge amount of data. If you have data of 100 patients, like UK Oxford School of Medicine, right, then you are good to go. Then you would get approval from Government of India to move forwards. It'll be a tentative approval, and then followed by 500 patients, 1,000 patients, will be a full-time approval. So that's broadly what the landscape of the vaccine and the plasma therapy is.
Sure. Thank you for explaining it to our viewers. And I think the whole world can just hope that this unprecedented situation that has been bestowed on us is gone very, very soon. And until then, we're all holding up together in this. And the conversation with you just makes me feel that I think India can be dubbed as the pharmacy of the world.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, no question. And going forward, Tanya, will not only be the pharmacy of the world, it'll be the virus capital, the virologist capital of the world.
Not the capital. That's that can be
we would bring all kinds of antivirus treatments in the world faster than anybody else could, for sure.
Absolute delight, absolute pleasure talking to you, Mr. Dua. Thank you so much for taking out the time.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. God bless you and do well in life. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.